Today, we're diving deep into a topic that everyone talks about but few truly understand: the California housing market. We all know it's expensive, but what makes it so different from anywhere else in the United States? The story you hear is usually about high demand, a sunny lifestyle, and tech booms. But the real story is far more complex and, frankly, a lot more concerning. It's not just that people want to live here. The core of the problem is structural, built up over decades of policy decisions and geographic realities. First, let's talk about land. California has a lot of it, right? But the amount of buildable land in desirable areas is incredibly limited, squeezed between oceans, mountains, and deserts. This scarcity is the foundation of the problem. On top of that, you have the human element: zoning. For decades, California's most prosperous cities, Los Angeles, San Francisco, San Diego, San Jose, did something economically paradoxical. They aggressively courted high-paying jobs, clustering millions of them into small geographic hubs. At the same time, they passed incredibly restrictive zoning laws, like single-family-only zones, that made it nearly impossible to build enough housing to accommodate the very workers they were attracting. Think about it. You invite millions of people to a party, but only set out a few chairs. What happens? Everyone fights over the chairs, and the price of a seat skyrockets. That's exactly what happened to California housing. These policies artificially choked supply, turning a basic human need, a place to live, into a high-stakes financial asset. Your home stopped being just a home. It became a golden ticket, a retirement plan, an investment vehicle. And this worked for a while, as long as incomes kept rising and the music never stopped. But here's the part of the story that most people are missing right now. The foundations of this seemingly invincible market are showing deep, serious cracks. For the first time since the early 1990s recession, the California housing market is more vulnerable than at any point in modern history. And it's not because demand has vanished, it's because the type of demand is changing in a way that the market isn't prepared for. Let's look at the data. Outmigration from California is at an all-time high. And who is leaving? It's not just retirees cashing out. It's middle-income families, the nurses, the teachers, the small business owners, the skilled tradespeople. These are the people who form the backbone of a stable, healthy economy and a sustainable housing market. They are being priced out, and they are leaving faster than they can be replaced. They're moving to Texas, Arizona, Florida, and Tennessee, taking their tax dollars and their economic contributions with them. At the same time, the engines that powered California's hypergrowth are sputtering. The tech industry, once a reliable source of endless high-income jobs, is facing a wave of layoffs and a new reality of slower growth. Companies that once saw California as the only place to be are now looking at high business costs, strict regulations, and a shrinking talent pool, and they're thinking twice. Add to this the shock of soaring interest rates, which have crushed affordability for anyone who isn't paying in cash. So what does this create? You have a market where prices are still astronomically high, but not because local demand is strong and healthy. Prices are high purely because the supply is so incredibly artificially constrained. It's like a balloon stretched to its absolute limit. It looks big and impressive, but the tension is immense. This is the critical point. The market is propped up by scarcity, not by a thriving, broad-based local economy. It relies on a shrinking pool of high-income buyers and investors to keep the numbers up. But when you lose the middle class, you lose the long-term stability. A market that serves only the very wealthy is not a healthy market. It's a fragile one. And here's the thing about fragile systems: they don't bend, they break. When the pressure finally becomes too much, they don't adjust slowly and gracefully. They snap. We saw it in the early 90s when the aerospace industry collapsed, And housing prices in Southern California fell for nearly 6 years. The underlying economic fundamentals had changed, and the market eventually had to face reality. Today, we're seeing a similar confluence of factors: a hollowing out of the middle class, a shift in key industries, rising costs, and a fundamental affordability crisis. The headlines might still show eye-watering prices in Beverly Hills or Palo Alto, but those are outliers. They don't represent the health of the entire ecosystem. The real story is in the quiet exodus of families who can no longer afford the California dream. So, the big question is, what happens next? Will the iron grip of limited supply continue to defy economic gravity, keeping prices artificially inflated forever? Or are we on the verge of a significant correction? A moment where the market finally has to reconcile with the new economic reality? The tension between historic undersupply and weakening demand fundamentals is the defining story of the California housing market today. This isn't about fear-mongering, it's about understanding the deep structural forces at play. For decades, California's housing market has been a one-way bet up. But the rules of the game are changing. The outmigration, the industry shifts, the affordability crisis. These aren't just temporary blips. They are fundamental changes that will shape the state for years to come. What do you think? Are you seeing this in your community? Is California heading for a long overdue housing correction? Or will the lack of supply keep prices high no matter what? I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences down in the comments. Let's start a conversation about what's really happening on the ground. What if I told you the biggest threat to California's housing market isn't what everyone thinks it is? It's not just about high prices. It's a quiet, seismic shift happening right under our feet. A growing disconnect between the staggering cost of a home and the economic engine that's supposed to pay for it. For decades, we all accepted California's crazy prices. Why? Because the justification was always there. Explosive job growth and skyrocketing wages, especially in the tech sector. Silicon Valley wasn't just a place. It was a promise of prosperity that propped up the entire state's real estate values. But that engine is starting to sputter. Today, the headlines are different. Major tech companies are announcing layoffs, freezing hiring, and quietly shifting entire operations to other, more affordable states. Some are even replacing human jobs with automation and AI. This isn't just a temporary dip. It's a fundamental change in the landscape. At the very same time, the remote work revolution has permanently altered the game. The must-live here premium that kept demand sky-high in places like San Francisco and Los Angeles has vanished for millions of workers. Why pay a fortune to live next to an office you only visit once a month, if at all? This has fundamentally weakened the magnetic pull of California's major metro areas. Now, let's layer on the other pressures. Affordability is at historic lows, making it nearly impossible for the average family to buy a home. Taxes keep climbing, and our infrastructure, from roads to the power grid, is visibly deteriorating under the strain. Then there's the insurance crisis. Homeowners' insurance premiums are hitting record highs, with some major carriers pulling out of the state altogether. And let's not forget the ever-present threat of wildfires, which is now actively pricing people out of entire regions. When you add all of this up, you get a housing market that isn't standing on a strong foundation of economic fundamentals anymore. It's being held up by one single pillar: a chronic lack of supply. And that, my friends, is an incredibly dangerous situation. Relying solely on undersupply to keep prices high is like building a skyscraper on a foundation of sand. It works until it doesn't. A lack of inventory doesn't protect a market when a growing number of people simply can't afford to live there anymore. Or worse, no longer want to. The moment demand falters, that pillar starts to crack. We're already seeing the early signs. In several key counties, housing inventory is slowly but surely starting to rise. In many high-end markets, sellers are being forced to cut their asking prices to attract buyers. And the days-on-market metric is climbing in cities that, just a few years ago, saw homes sold in a weekend bidding war. The market is getting slower, quieter. You might be thinking, well, can't we just build more houses? It's not that simple. Builders are caught in a trap. Due to heavy regulation, high land costs, and expensive labor and materials, they can't profitably build the affordable housing that California desperately needs. So the so-called supply problem isn't going to be solved anytime soon. This means California is stuck in a painful loop. The market stays stubbornly expensive, even as the underlying demand from buyers weakens. And that is the very definition of a fragile, vulnerable market. It's a house of cards waiting for a gust of wind. So, what happens next? If unemployment ticks up even slightly, if the tech sector continues to falter, or if the Federal Reserve decides to tighten credit again, California isn't likely to face a traditional 2008-style crash where everything plummets at once. Instead, we're likely to see something more complex. A great rebalancing. Overpriced regions that have been coasting on old momentum will finally have to face a painful correction. Stagnant areas might hollow out as the last economic drivers leave. It's no longer a question of if the structure of California's housing market will shift, but how fast and where. This is a critical moment for anyone who owns a home, wants to buy a home, or simply lives in California. The state's real estate landscape is on the verge of a major transition, and you need to know how it will affect you. That's why you need to stay tuned to this channel. In our next episodes, we're going to do a deep dive. We'll expose which specific California cities are most at risk of a downturn, which ones are likely to hold their value through the storm, and which hidden pockets are already showing the early warning signs of this massive change. The information is out there, but you have to know where to look. Make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications, because you won't want to miss what's coming next. Thanks for watching.